On a bright Saturday morning in Atlanta's bustling downtown district, a 12-year-old boy named Andrew stood in front of his bedroom mirror, carefully adjusting his neatly pressed button-down shirt. His dark eyes sparkled with excitement as he counted the money in his dinosaur-themed wallet for what felt like the 100th time that week. $298, he whispered to himself, a proud smile spreading across his face. For 6 long months, Andrew had done everything possible to save money. He'd washed his neighbors' cars on weekends, helped his uncle organize inventory at his small convenience store, and even sacrificed buying his favorite comic books. Every dollar was meant for one special purpose: buying his mother the perfect birthday present from Elegance and Grace, the most prestigious boutique in the city. His mother, a hardworking nurse who often pulled double shifts at the local hospital, had always admired the store's window displays during their weekend walks downtown. She would pause just for a moment to gaze at the elegant scarves and designer handbags before quickly moving along, saying, "Maybe someday." Andrew had noticed how her eyes would linger on a particular pearl-embellished handbag, and he'd overheard her telling his aunt it was just like the one Grandma used to have. The night before, Andrew had carefully planned everything. He'd researched the store's opening hours online, mapped out the quickest bus route, and even watched YouTube videos about how to spot authentic designer items. His father, watching him prepare with amusement, had offered to drive him, but Andrew had insisted on going alone. "I want to do this by myself, Dad. I'm not a little kid anymore." That morning, as Andrew finished his breakfast, his mother had already left for her early shift at the hospital, completely unaware of her son's plans. His father sat across the kitchen table, sipping coffee and pretending to read the news on his tablet, but really watching his son with quiet pride. "You sure you don't want me to come with you, champ?" he asked one last time. "I'm sure, Dad," Andrew replied, straightening his posture. "I've been saving up forever, and I know exactly what I want to get her. Plus," he added with a grin, "I already printed out the bus schedule and everything." As Andrew walked to the bus stop, his savings tucked safely in his wallet, he couldn't help but feel grown up. Other kids his age might spend their money on video games or sneakers, but he had bigger plans. His mother deserved something special, something that would make her eyes light up the way they did when she looked at that pearl-embellished bag in the window. The bus ride downtown was filled with Andrew rehearsing what he would say to the sales staff. He practiced his good morning and prepared answers to questions about what he was looking for. He'd even memorized the exact model number of the handbag from the store's website. In his mind, everything would go perfectly. He would walk in, make his purchase, and surprise his mother with the bag she'd been admiring for months. Little did Andrew know that his carefully planned morning was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would not only change his day, but would end up impacting the entire community. As the bus approached his stop, he checked his reflection one last time in his phone's camera, straightened his collar, and took a deep breath. The gleaming storefront of Elegance and Grace was just visible in the distance, its windows sparkling in the morning sun. Andrew's heart raced with anticipation, filled with the pure joy of a child about to do something wonderful for someone they love. What he didn't realize was that sometimes the world had different plans, and that this day would test not just his spirit, but also reveal the true character of his community and the power of standing up for what's right. As he stepped off the bus, the weight of his savings in his pocket reminded him of all the hard work that had led to this moment, completely unaware that his simple shopping trip was about to become something much more significant. As Andrew pushed open the heavy glass doors of Elegance and Grace, the cool air conditioning hit his face. The store smelled like expensive perfume and leather, and soft classical music played in the background. His eyes widened at the sight of crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and perfectly polished marble floors that reflected his own image. For a moment, he stood there, taking it all in. This was exactly how he'd imagined it. Even better, actually. The pearl-embellished handbag he'd seen his mother admiring was right there in the display, looking even more beautiful up close. Andrew smiled, knowing he'd made the right choice in saving up for this special gift. But his smile quickly faded when he noticed a tall man in an expensive suit watching him from behind the counter. The man, who wore a name tag that read Store Manager, had been typing something on his computer, but as soon as Andrew walked in, his fingers stopped moving. His eyes narrowed, following Andrew's every move. Andrew tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling in his stomach and walked towards the handbag display. He remembered what his father always said, "Keep your head high and act like you belong, because you do." So that's exactly what he did, keeping his steps steady and confident. Just as he was about to reach for the handbag to check its price tag, the manager's voice cut through the quiet store like a knife. "Can I help you?" The words weren't friendly. They were sharp and cold, making Andrew's hand freeze mid-air. "Yes, sir," Andrew replied politely, just as he'd practiced. "I'm interested in buying this handbag for my mother's birthday." He reached for his wallet to show he had the money, but the manager stepped between him and the display. "Listen, kid," the manager said, his voice dripping with suspicion. "This isn't a toy store. These bags cost more than your entire wardrobe. I suggest you find somewhere more appropriate for someone like you." Andrew felt his face grow hot. "Sir, I have the money. I've been saving up for 6 months. It's for my mom's birthday and—" The manager cut him off with a dismissive wave. "I've heard all the stories before. We don't have time for this. Either buy something or leave." Other customers were starting to stare, some looking uncomfortable, others pretending not to notice. Andrew's hands were shaking now, but he stood his ground. "Please, sir, just let me show you." "Security," the manager called out loudly, even though Andrew hadn't done anything wrong. "Escort this young man out. He's disturbing our customers." A security guard appeared, looking uncertain about the situation. Andrew could see the guard's discomfort as he approached, clearly seeing nothing wrong with the well-dressed, polite young boy standing before him. "But I just wanted to," Andrew tried one last time, his voice cracking slightly. The money in his wallet felt heavy now, like it was weighing him down instead of lifting him up with possibility as it had just moments ago. The manager crossed his arms. "Either you leave now, or we'll have to call the police for trespassing." His voice was loud enough for everyone in the store to hear, making sure Andrew felt as small as possible. With tears threatening to spill from his eyes, Andrew turned toward the door. As he walked out, he could hear whispers from other customers, some expressing shock at the manager's behavior, others simply continuing their shopping as if nothing had happened. Outside the store, Andrew sat on a nearby bench, trying to catch his breath and make sense of what had just happened. All his planning, all his saving, all his excitement crushed in less than 5 minutes. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands, wondering if he should call his dad. But no, he didn't want his father to see him cry. Not over this. What Andrew didn't know was that someone important had witnessed everything through the store's large windows. Someone who was about to turn this humiliating moment into something much bigger than a simple shopping trip gone wrong. As he sat there, trying to compose himself, the wheels of justice were already beginning to turn, and his story was about to become much more than just a bad experience at a luxury store. The designer handbag that was supposed to be his mother's perfect birthday gift still sat in the window display, catching the sunlight and throwing rainbow reflections onto the sidewalk. But now, instead of representing joy and celebration, it had become a symbol of something else entirely, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't the ones with the highest price tags, but the moments that define who we are and what we stand up for. The morning after the incident, Andrew's story had taken on a life of its own. His father's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications, and local news stations kept calling for interviews. The video of what happened in the store had been shared millions of times overnight, with people from all walks of life expressing their outrage and support. Dr. Thompson called early that morning with news that would change everything. "The community wants to do something," she explained. "They don't just want to be angry, they want to make real change happen." She told them about how hundreds of people were planning to gather outside Elegance and Grace that afternoon, not to protest with anger, but to educate with dignity. Local business owners from downtown had already printed thousands of flyers about customer rights. Community leaders had organized speakers to share their experiences. Even some former employees of the store had come forward, revealing a pattern of discriminatory behavior that had gone unchecked for years. By noon, the sidewalks around Elegance and Grace were filled with people. But this wasn't an angry mob. It was different. People brought chairs for the elderly. Local restaurants donated water and snacks. Children held signs that read, "Be kind to everyone," and "Love wins." The atmosphere felt more like a community gathering than a protest. One by one, people stepped up to share their stories. A grandfather talked about being followed around stores while shopping with his grandchildren. A successful businesswoman described being asked to show extra ID when using her credit card. A young college student shared how he was always asked if he could really afford to shop in luxury stores. But something unexpected happened too. Store employees from other boutiques in the area started coming out during their breaks. They listened to the stories and shared their own experiences of wanting to help but feeling powerless against corporate policies. Some even admitted to their own biases and promised to do better. The local news cameras captured everything. Instead of angry confrontations, they'd found thoughtful discussions. Instead of chaos, they found organization and purpose. People from different backgrounds were talking to each other, many for the first time, about experiences they'd never shared before. Dr. Thompson had helped organize a team of civil rights lawyers who set up a booth to provide free legal information about consumer rights. They handed out cards with hotline numbers and resources for reporting discrimination. "This isn't about one store or one incident anymore," she explained to the cameras. "This is about changing the way we treat each other." Social media couldn't get enough of the positive approach. Videos of the peaceful gathering went viral, showing the world how a community could come together to fight discrimination with dignity. Hashtags like #ShopWithRespect and #RetailEquality started trending nationwide. Andrew watched it all from a distance, still processing how his simple shopping trip had sparked such a movement. His mother had taken the day off work to be with him, and together they walked through the crowd, thanking people for their support. Many people hugged them, sharing their own stories of saving up to buy something special for a loved one. The corporate office of elegance and grace couldn't ignore this peaceful but powerful response. Their phone lines were overwhelmed with calls from not just angry customers, but also from other luxury brands wanting to know how they could prevent similar incidents in their stores. The story had touched a nerve in the retail industry. As the afternoon sun began to set, something beautiful happened. Local musicians who had joined the gathering began playing soft melodies. People started sharing stories of times when store employees had gone out of their way to help them, proving that change was possible. The focus shifted from anger about the past to hope for the future. A young store employee from a neighboring boutique approached Anda with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Because of you, we're finally having conversations we should have had years ago. You've helped us all be better." Andrew smiled, feeling for the first time that maybe everything had happened for a reason. The gathering ended with a powerful moment of silence, not in anger, but in hope. The crowd of hundreds joined hands, forming a circle around the block. In that moment, everyone understood that this wasn't just about one boy's experience in one store. It was about making sure that every person, regardless of who they were, could walk into any store and be treated with dignity and respect. As people began to disperse, leaving behind nothing but positive messages written in chalk on the sidewalk, Andrew realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting back at someone, it's about bringing people together to make things better for everyone. His failed shopping trip had turned into something far more valuable than any designer handbag could ever be. The real changes were just beginning, and the next day would bring even more surprises. But for now, Andrew went home feeling proud, not because he had gotten revenge, but because he had helped start an important conversation that would change his community forever. The power of education turned out to be more impactful than anyone could have imagined. The day after the peaceful gathering, Andrew received an unexpected invitation. The city's most prestigious business school wanted him to speak to their retail management students about his experience. At first, Andrew was terrified. "Me? Speak to college students?" He asked his parents at breakfast, pushing his cereal around in his bowl. His father smiled warmly. "Son, sometimes the best teachers are the ones who have lived through something important." His mother added, "And you've certainly done that." Dr. Thompson helped Andrew prepare his speech. They sat in her office, surrounded by law books and certificates, working on how to turn his experience into a lesson others could learn from. "Remember," she told him, "you're not just telling your story. You're helping create change." The lecture hall was packed on the day of his speech. Students filled every seat, and people were even standing along the walls. Andrew spotted the retired teacher who had filmed the incident. She sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Next to her was the food blogger whose posts had helped the story go viral. Taking a deep breath, Andrew stepped up to the podium. His knees were shaking, but his voice was clear. "Last week," he began, "I was just a kid trying to buy his mom a birthday present. Today, I'm here to talk about something much bigger than a handbag." For the next hour, Andrew shared not just what happened to him, but what he'd learned from it. He talked about how it felt to be judged before saying a word. He described the shame of being kicked out of a store for no reason, but most importantly, he talked about how the community's response had shown him the power of standing up for what's right. The students listened intently, many taking notes. During the question and answer session, one student raised her hand and said, "I work part-time in retail. I've seen this happen, but I never knew what to do about it." Andrew's response was wise beyond his years. Sometimes just speaking up and saying this isn't right can make a huge difference. What happened next surprised everyone. The dean of the business school stood up and made an announcement. Starting next semester, she declared, "We're adding a mandatory course on inclusive retail practices, and we want Andrew to help design it." The room erupted in applause. Students came up afterward to share their own stories. Some admitted to their own biases and promised to do better. Others talked about changes they wanted to make in their current retail jobs. One student even cried while apologizing for times she'd treated customers differently based on their appearance. Local business owners who attended the speech started talking about creating a training program for their employees. They wanted to make sure what happened to Andrew never happened to anyone else in their stores. The city's retail association asked for his input on new guidelines for customer service. News of the speech spread quickly. Other schools and universities started calling, wanting Andrew to share his story with their students too. Business magazines wrote articles about how a 12-year-old was changing the face of retail education. Even national retail chains began reaching out, asking for advice on improving their training programs. Andrew's mother watched all of this with tears of pride in her eyes. "You wanted to give me a birthday present," she told him that evening. "Instead, you've given our whole community a gift that will last forever." The business school created a scholarship in Andrew's name, specifically for students who wanted to study retail management with a focus on equality and inclusion. They called it the Change Makers Scholarship, and its first recipients would start classes the following year. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when a group of young retail workers approached Andrew after his speech. They had formed a network to support each other in speaking up against discrimination in their stores. "You've given us courage," they told him. "You've shown us that one voice can make a difference." As Andrew headed home that evening, exhausted but happy, he realized something important. The revenge he'd gotten wasn't about making someone feel bad, it was about making everyone feel better. His story wasn't just about one bad experience anymore. It had become a lesson that would be taught in classrooms and training sessions for years to come. The pearl-embellished handbag he'd wanted to buy his mother seemed like a distant memory now. Instead, he had given her something far more valuable. A son who had turned an act of discrimination into an opportunity for education and change. And that was worth more than all the designer handbags in the world. As news of Andrew's business school speech spread, something unexpected happened at Elegance and Grace's corporate headquarters. The company's board of directors called an emergency meeting that lasted for hours. Their decision would change everything. The next morning, a sleek corporate car pulled up outside Andrew's house. Inside was the company's CEO, who had flown in specifically to handle this situation. She asked to speak with Andrew and his parents, not as part of a publicity stunt, but because she genuinely wanted to understand what had gone wrong. "We've failed," she admitted, sitting in their living room. "Not just you, but countless others, and we want to make real changes." She shared the company's immediate actions. The store manager had been removed from his position, and every employee would undergo comprehensive training. But she wanted to do more. "We'd like to create a customer advisory board," she explained, "focused on making our stores welcoming to everyone. And we'd like Andrew to be its youngest member." His parents exchanged proud looks as she continued, "His insight could help us prevent this from ever happening again." The company's legal team had also been busy. They'd reviewed security footage from the past year and found a disturbing pattern. The fired manager hadn't just discriminated against Andrew. He'd been doing it consistently. The company was reaching out to every customer who had experienced similar treatment. Local news stations camped outside the store as workers took down the old signs. The store would close for 2 weeks for a complete overhaul, not just of its policies, but of its entire culture. Every employee would be retrained, and new staff would be hired with a focus on diversity. During the store's renovation, something beautiful happened. Other luxury retailers in the area started examining their own practices. They didn't want to wait for their own incident to make changes. Store owners began sharing resources and creating shared guidelines for inclusive customer service. The CEO kept her word. Within days, training programs were rewritten, hiring policies were updated, and a hotline was established for reporting discrimination. But most importantly, they asked Andra to help review these changes, valuing his perspective as both a customer and a catalyst for change. When the store reopened, it looked different. Gone were the intimidating security guards at the door. Instead, greeters welcomed everyone with genuine smiles. Signs in multiple languages reminded customers of their rights. The staff reflected the diversity of their city. The pearl-embellished handbag still sat in the window, but now it had a small plaque beside it. "This bag represents more than luxury," it read. "It represents our commitment to treating everyone with dignity and respect." The company had turned a moment of shame into a symbol of change. Ando visited the store on reopening day, this time with both his parents. The same security guard who had escorted him out now welcomed him back with tears in his eyes and an apology. "You taught us all something important," he said quietly. As they walked through the store, other customers recognized Andra. Some wanted pictures, others just wanted to shake his hand. But what touched him most was seeing new employees being trained, watching videos about customer respect and dignity, videos that now included his story. The company's actions had an immediate impact on their bottom line, but not in the way some expected. Sales actually increased as customers appreciated the genuine commitment to change. Other luxury brands started calling, wanting to learn from their example. That evening, Andra sat with his parents, processing everything that had happened. "I never thought getting kicked out of a store could lead to all this," he said. His mother hugged him tight. "Sometimes," she replied, "the best changes come from the hardest moments." The corporate investigation was complete, the policies were changed, and the training was improved. But more importantly, a young boy's experience had transformed an entire industry's approach to customer service. It wasn't just about selling luxury items anymore, it was about treating everyone with the respect they deserved. 6 months had passed since the incident at Elegance and Grace, and the changes that started in one luxury store had rippled across the entire city. Andra sat in his room, looking at a special delivery that had just arrived. It was the store's new training manual, and his story was on the first page. The city's retail landscape had transformed. Walk into any store, from the fanciest boutiques to local shops, and you'd see the difference. Every employee wore a pin that read, "Everyone welcome here." Security guards had been trained to greet instead of intimidate. Customer feedback boards hung prominently near entrances. Andra's mother's birthday had come and gone. Instead of a designer handbag, he had given her something more meaningful, a scrapbook filled with news articles, photos, and letters from people whose lives had been touched by her son's courage. "This is worth more than any handbag," she had said, tears in her eyes. The customer advisory board that Andra helped create had become a model for other businesses. Once a month, people from all walks of life gathered to share their shopping experiences and suggest improvements. Store owners actually listened, making real changes based on customer feedback. Dr. Thompson's law firm had started a new division focused solely on retail discrimination cases. But they found themselves handling fewer complaints. Stores were solving problems before they escalated. The training programs Andra helped design were working. The retired teacher who had filmed the incident now taught a class at the local community center about standing up against discrimination. Sometimes, she would tell their students, the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of courage. The food blogger's following had grown tremendously. She now used her platform to highlight businesses that treated all customers with respect. Her Shop with Dignity guide had become the city's most trusted resource for inclusive shopping experiences. Even the security guard who had escorted Andra out that day had found a new purpose. He now trained other security personnel about the difference between real security threats and harmful assumptions. His sessions always started with Andrew's story, the pearl-embellished handbag. It had been retired to a display case in the store's entrance, with a plaque telling the story of how one boy's determination to buy his mother a birthday present had changed an entire industry. Beside it stood a larger display showing photos of community members sharing their stories of positive change. Andrew's father had started a mentorship program, helping young people learn about their rights and how to stand up for themselves with dignity. "My son taught me," he would say, "that sometimes the best revenge is making things better for everyone." The business school's Changemakers Scholarship had its first recipients, 5 students committed to studying inclusive business practices. They each wrote Andrew letters, thanking him for inspiring them to make a difference in the retail world. As Andrew finished his homework one evening, he heard a knock on his door. His mother stood there, holding something familiar, his dinosaur wallet, the one that had held his savings all those months ago. "Remember this?" she asked with a smile. They sat together on his bed, and she pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was his original shopping list, with the handbag's item number carefully written in his neat handwriting. "You wanted to buy me something special," she said softly, "but you ended up giving our whole community a gift instead." Andrew smiled, thinking about how differently everything had turned out. His failed shopping trip hadn't just changed one store or one manager, it had sparked a movement that continued to grow. Every day, he received messages from people sharing their own stories of standing up against discrimination, inspired by what he had done. The revenge he'd gotten wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't about making someone feel bad or getting even. It was about making the world a little bit better, one store at a time. And that, Andrew realized, was the best kind of revenge there could be.